Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu Mavid Vishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us. May he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Peace, peace, peace. And good evening. So we're continuing with some lectures of Swami Abhedananda, one of the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, who spent about 20 years in the West. And this Friday we've selected Spirit and Matter, which is basically going to talk about the age-old debate between dualism and monism. And within dualism, you have two different schools, depending on which side you want to start with as the ultimate reality. And so, Atma, would you like to start us off?
Spirit and matter. Spirit and matter have always been subjects for discussion in science, philosophy, and religion. Great thinkers of all countries have done their best to understand the true meanings of these two terms and to establish their mutual relation. The two words have various synonyms, such as ego and a non-ego, subject and object, mind and matter. Scientists and philosophers have advanced many theories from time to time to explain their ideas and conceptions about them, and have arrived at different conclusions. Some say that spirit or mind or ego is the cause of matter, while others reverse the relation and believe that matter is the cause of spirit or mind or ego. These conclusions have given foundation to the various explanations of the universe, which can be classified under three heads: the spiritualistic or idealistic, the materialistic, and the monistic theories. The spiritualistic or idealistic theory claims that spirit or mind is the creator of matter and energy, hence of all material objects, and it denies the existence of matter as distinct and separate from the mode or condition of spirit or mind. The materialistic theory, on the contrary, maintains that matter produces spirit, mind, ego, or subject.
Yeah, so he's just outlined the basic problem is, if we think of the world being made up of two things, spirit and matter, or subject and object, or mind and matter, however you want to divide it up. And those are, yeah, it's interesting that those are all kind of equivalent ways of dualistically dividing the world. Then you have the problem of which one came first. Did the mind create the matter, or did the matter create the mind? Well, never mind the matter, I guess. All right, so we'll continue in here to see how he is going to get us out of this mess. You want to continue?
There have been many idealistic or spiritualistic philosophers in different countries at different times. In India, Greece, Germany, and England have arisen a number of idealists like Bishop Berkeley, who have denied the existence of the external world and also of matter as an entity separate from mental ideas. Modern Christian Science, which teaches that there is no such thing as matter, but that everything is mind, has been built upon this idealistic doctrine of Bishop Berkeley and other philosophers of the same school. In America, it is new because the nation is new. America has not yet produced any great idealistic philosopher.
Yeah, before I joined the monastery, I played organ for different churches, and one of them was a Christian Science church. And so I got exposed to some of their ideas. And it's a very nice idea. It's just that you do come across this fundamental problem that they're trying to kind of almost explain away matter, but not quite as extreme. I mean, it doesn't come across quite as extreme as it might sound in this paragraph. But certainly the mind is going to control the matter in any case. All right. Do you want to continue? Okay.
The materialistic theory of the universe, on the other hand, is maintained by a large majority of the scientists, physicists, chemists, medical practitioners, and the evolutionists of the present time. They try to deduce everything from matter and claim that it is the cause of mind, ego, or spirit. Although there are thousands and millions of people all over the world who advocate this theory and call themselves materialists, still very few can define the term matter and give a clear idea of what they understand by it.
Yeah, and of course in physics, we didn't even have a clear idea of energy until maybe 150, 200 years ago. I've forgotten the exact date, but it was there wasn't any clear concept in physics until rather late in the game. And so if you're going to look at, say, energy and matter in that dualistic framework, we don't even have a good idea of what that is. And of course, matter originally was thought of as 5 elements, and then they began to look at chemical elements. Sometimes they looked at the states of matter, solid, liquid, gas, and then they had something called ether, which doesn't seem to exist for any good purpose anymore. So all these different ideas of what matter is came up. But he's going to give a good argument here that it's something that's very difficult to pin down. All right, so do you want to read again?
What is matter? Has anybody ever seen matter? This question can be asked to the materialists. Do we see matter? No. We see color. Is color the same as matter? No, it is a quality. Where does it exist? An uneducated man may think that the color of a flower, as perceived, exists in the flower. But the physiologists explain that the color, which is perceived, does not exist as such in the flower, but that it is a sensation caused by a certain order of vibrations coming in contact with our consciousness through the medium of the optic nerves. This may seem strange, but it is true. The perception of color is a compound effect produced by vibrations of ether, which entering through the eyes create another set of vibrations in the brain cells. And these vibrations, when translated by the conscious entity, are called sensations. Color, therefore, is the result of the blending of the objective and subjective elements. It is the product of the combination of what comes from the outside world and what is given by the subjective or mental activities. Thus, we can understand that color does not rest in the flower, but it depends upon the retina, optic nerves, and brain cells as well. So it cannot be the same as matter.
And then, of course, we know that not everybody perceives color quite the same way. And in fact, we don't really know how one individual perceives color compared to somebody else in the most specific sense, but in a more general sense, we know that some people are red-green colorblind, and so their perception of the world has to be very different from ours. We know that some animals have 4 cone cells. So they have 4 different color receptors, so they've got another whole spectrum of colors that they could probably see. Some see a little bit more into the infrared, some see a little bit more into the ultraviolet than we do, so they're going to have a different kind of perception of color. So the way we perceive the world is very dependent on our sense organs and the way the sense organs translate the information, the energy information coming in to the senses and then going into the mind. And then, of course, we know that there are mental disturbances which cause people to see things differently. So he's very correct here, and he's going to go into the same problem with the other senses. So we can continue now, and he's going to tell us about sound.
Similarly, we may ask, is sound which we hear the same as matter? No, it is the result of a certain kind of vibration, plus the conscious activity of the mind. If you go to sleep, the vibration will enter through your ears and be carried through the auditory nerves into the brain cells. But you will not hear it because the recipient mind is not there to translate the vibration into the sensation of sound. Sound, therefore, is not the same as matter. In the same matter, it can be shown that the other senses do not give us any information about what we call matter. Then we ask, what is matter? John Stuart Mill defines matter as the permanent possibility of sensation, and mind as the permanent possibility of feeling. Are we better off after hearing this definition?
Right. There's a couple other things we can say about perception. Yeah, one of the most interesting things I learned in physiological psychology was the idea of how our brain perceives colors. It actually, you see, if you have these 3 different cone cells, your brain compares how strong the signal is coming in the wavelengths that it tends to perceive the best. In other words, each cone perceives a certain spectrum of wave cells. So this one might perceive best in, say, this area, and the next one might perceive better in this area, and the next one perceives better in this area. So if you get a particular wavelength of light coming in, this one's perceiving this much and that one's perceiving that much, you get that information in your brain and it says, oh, you're seeing yellow or whatever color that is. And then if you're missing one of those cones, then you don't get as much comparison, and so you don't have as big a spectrum of possible interpretations. So then the other interesting thing is that some people have what they call synesthesia, where the receptor cells for different inputs into the brain get kind of cross-wired. So when you see things, it also activates certain parts of your auditory system, for example, or the other way around. Sound might come in and that might activate certain parts of your visual system. So they literally see sound with color. They see colors along with the sound, or they see sounds along with the colors. So our perception of things is very definitely dependent on how our brains are wired, and there's really no particular guarantee that one person sees things exactly the way some other person sees, even if they have the same number of cones. And of course, this is called the hard problem of consciousness, or the Mary problem, because it was originally proposed is how does Mary perceive red? And of course, we don't really know how Mary perceives red. All right, so let's see, did this actually solve our problem? Did John Stuart Mill help us here? Where did that go? Why did I miss a page? What happened to John Stuart Mill?
You want me to read him again?
Yeah, go ahead.
John Stuart Mill defines matter as the permanent possibility of sensation, and mind as the permanent possibility of feeling. We're better off with hearing this definition? On the contrary, it is more confusing. The whole difficulty has in the word possibility. It means matter is what permanently makes sensation possible, and mind or spirit is what permanently makes feeling possible, or in other words, matter is what can be permanently felt or perceived. That is to say, the object of feeling. The spirit is what can permanently feel or perceive. That means the subject of feeling. What permanently makes sensation possible can never be revealed by the senses, for the senses are no more than open doors for our sensations. All that we can predicate of matter is that it causes sensations. When we try to know its nature per se, or any particulars concerning it, our senses do not help us. The eyes are only instrumental in perceiving the sensation of color, the ears of sound, nostrils of odor. Our perception of the external world is limited by these sense powers, and all sensations are either direct or indirect results of our sense activities. Although we know that matter is something which exists in space and time and causes various sensations, still we cannot see or touch it. What corresponds to the name matter will always remain intangible. We may touch a chair, a piece of wood, or gold, but we cannot touch matter itself. This is very curious. Gold or stone is not matter, but it is that which is produced by matter. Matter appears as wood or stone.
So we're trying to get to the fundamental nature of what matter is. And of course, chemistry has boiled it down to atoms. And then quantum physics has boiled the atoms down to protons, electrons, and neutrons and other subatomic particles, which now are all considered to be disturbances in an underlying field. They're not things, but they're disturbances in a field. And so that gets pretty nebulous, and the idea of some sort of solid matter that we're interacting with becomes dubious at best. So now he's going to go into the definition of the word matter from the original Latin word. So let's see what he says about that.
It may be interesting to know the history of the term matter. This word is derived from the Latin materies, meaning stuff. And it was originally used in the sense of the solid wood of a tree or a timber for building. Gradually, a generalized concept was formed, which meant anything substantial out of which some other thing was fashioned. When a wooden statue was made, the form was distinguished from the substance, wood, or materies. Here it was still wood, but when a statue was made of stone or metal, it was still called materies. Thus the name materies signified the substance out of which something was shaped or fashioned. Gradually, when the question arose, what was the substance out of which the world was made? The answer was materies or matter. So the word matter does not mean any definite thing. It is used for that unknown substance out of which the known objects of perception are formed. Here ends the literal and real meaning of the term. Matter can be used in the sense of any unknown substance which lies at the bottom or foundation of some form or object. For instance, in our ordinary conversation, we use the word in such expressions as, what is the matter? It does not matter. Important matter. Decaying matter, and so forth. In science and philosophy, however, matter is that unknown substance out of which all phenomenal forms are fashioned. It is beyond sense perception, yet it underlies all the objects of the universe. It is not the same as space or time, but it fills space, manifests itself in time, and cannot be limited by the category of causality.
You know, when you, if you study the history of science, and especially chemistry, you put yourself in the mindset of those who were living centuries before and living through these times, you realize how difficult it is to get a grasp on the nature of things or stuff that we're trying to get a hold of here. It's too bad that they don't teach more of that in school. Now, I think there's some classes now that they teach specifically in, say, the history of science, so that you do get a feeling for that, because so often science is simply taught as the current, most recent knowledge rather than looking at it through a historical perspective. And of course, it'll probably change in another 50 to 100 years. It may look different still. But it's also interesting when he talks here about it not being the same as space and time, but it fills space and manifests itself in time. And John Dobson used to point out that we used to think of those four things as the framework of the universe. It was the stage of space and time, and the actors were matter and energy. And so you had things working with energy in the framework of space and time. And he pointed out that the equations of modern physics have collapsed those boundaries. There are not neat boundaries between space and time or between matter and energy. Relativity theory erased the difficult or the hard boundary between space and time, and the equations mix up space and time, and you have to talk about 4D space and time, as though time is some kind of space. And matter and energy blurred in his equation E equals mc squared. So you can't say that energy is completely distinct from matter. Now, that equation is usually interpreted as energy can be converted into matter and matter can be converted into energy. That's not quite accurate. If you think about it, that sounds like you've got matter plus energy equals a constant, and there's no way you can get E plus m equals a constant from E equals mc squared. It doesn't work. It simply means that matter is a form of energy and energy is a form of matter. And you can change the form of that thing. And when you, for example, when an atomic bomb goes off, and that it appears that the amount of matter in the hydrogen has been reduced when it becomes helium, and that energy is then released, you have to remember that that energy is then being picked up by all sorts of other things, and that the energy is then being manifest in the form of those things. So it's not that the energy or the matter disappears into energy, it's that the energy that used to be embodied in the hydrogen is now embodied in all sorts of things that are now heated up or moving around. And so that energy has changed form, but is still manifested in some kind of matter in some other way, potential kinetic energy or temperature or something of that nature. So let's go ahead and continue this paragraph and see what he's going to say.
All these ideas are included in the meaning of the term matter. When we think of that substance of which the universe is the appearance, we imagine that it is vast, immense, marvelous, and possessed of wonderful powers which are constantly changing. But what is matter? Is it one or many? It is one. We cannot say that it is many. Herbert Spencer says, our conception of matter, reduced to its simplest shape, is that of coexistent positions that offer resistance as contrasted with our conception of space, in which the coexistent positions offer no resistance. Let us understand the difference between space and matter. Space is extension, offering no resistance. But that which offers resistance and lies in space is matter. He also states, of these two inseparable elements, the resistance is primary and the extension is secondary. As for example, when we touch something, it resists. Then we have an idea of resistance. But when we spread our hand, that feeling of resistance extends also in space. Herbert Spencer says again, our experience of force is that out of which the idea of matter is built up. That which opposes our muscular energy is immediately present to consciousness in terms of force. Hence, forces standing in a certain correlation in space from the whole content of matter. Furthermore, he adds, matter and motion, as we know them, are differently conditioned manifestations of force. They are the concretes built up from the contents of various mental relations. In order to feel resistance, there must be present one who feels. And then the force that is felt is the primary cause which gives rise to the conception of matter.
You know, it's interesting when you think that the concept of space is impossible unless you've got things in it. So the concept of space is dependent on things, and the concept of time is dependent on change. And change depends on energy. So all of those four things are interdependent. You can't conceive of them as being separate things that exist independently of each other. Space doesn't exist independently of matter, and change and time don't exist independently of energy. And we've already said that matter and energy and space and time do not have firm boundaries between them anymore. There's one thing behind them. And of course, in Vedanta, we call that one thing Brahman. That is the one that is behind everything. And let's see what would be a good time for the punchline. Why don't I take a turn? I'll read a little bit. Again, matter has not been created by anybody. No one has ever seen, no one has any imagination the creation of matter out of nothing, or its total annihilation. According to modern science, matter in its true nature is a substance uncreatable and indestructible. That is, it was neither created out of nothing, nor can it go back into nothing. There are various other definitions of matter. Some physicists say that matter is whatever possesses the property of gravitative attraction. But still, this does not tell us its true nature. We can only say that there is some substance which responds to attractions. Ernst Heikel, I guess you pronounce it, I'm not sure, again defines matter as infinitely extended substance and spirit as all-embracing energy of thought. So, you want to take a turn?
Sure.
Okay.
After studying these various definitions, we learn that matter is that substance of the universe which makes up the objective world, or that which can be perceived by the senses and cognized by the mind. It is always objective, and spirit or mind is always subjective, always the perceiver or cognizer of matter, the knower of the object. Now we can understand the difference. Spirit is the perceiver and knower, while matter is that which is perceived, sensed, and known. The one is the subject, the other is the object. These two exist in relation to each other. The objective world, or matter, forms only one half, while the other half is the subjective world of spirit. Therefore, the materialistic theory, which admits the existence of the object and denies the existence of spirit or mind or the subject, is one-sided and imperfect. It ignores the fact that matter or object can only exist as related to the subject.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember, too, that even though the distinction between matter, energy, time, and space are blurred, and they seem to all be related to one thing, and they're all interrelated, they're still useful concepts, and it's useful to know, to have some sort of model as to how they work and interact in this world of Maya. I think most of us are still in the world of Maya, or we wouldn't be sitting here. And so we have ways of thinking about this world of Maya, and that usually means we've divided it up into subjects and objects. We have a concept of space and time. We have a concept of matter and energy. And so these are all reasonable ideas to hold and to try to get a theory or a model for the world in general. And I think it's because all of those things come from the one Brahman is why they can be successful at all. You can have a materialistic theory that tries to get mind out of matter up to a certain extent. None of them have managed to get all the way to the conclusion they would like. But you can get a fairly successful theory out of that because ultimately they are one. And similarly, you can have the idealistic model that everything comes out of mind because ultimately they are all one. So if you want to think of mind as the all or matter as the all, you're just identifying a part with the whole. And I think probably the best explanation that I've heard of the conundrum, it was from Amit Goswami, and he used the Escher painting of two hands drawing each other. Escher was the famous artist that drew these pictures that were kind of logical conundrums, staircases that looked like they were going up, but suddenly you ended up back on the ground floor, even though you felt like you were always following the stairs going up, and things of that nature. And he had one painting where he had two hands. One hand had a pencil and it was drawing this hand, and this hand had a pencil and it was drawing this hand. And so he had two hands and they were both drawing each other, which represented the idea that in this world of Maya, we have a concept that there are two things and that one is creating the other. But actually, they both go back to an earlier source, which created the original duality to begin with. And so you can't get one out of the other. You can't say that this hand has created that hand or that hand has created this hand through the drawing. They're simultaneously drawing each other through this apparitional world of Maya. All right, so let's look at the materialistic blunder here.
The materialistic theory is a logical blunder because it is based upon a confusion between object and subject. It asserts that matter is objective, but at the same time it tries to show that it is also the cause of the subject, which it can never be. You're
talking about like A is one thing, like A, B.
Can never become not A. Materialism begins with the idea that matter is objective and ends in attempting to prove that this objective something has become the subjective mind, spirit, or ego. It first takes for granted that matter is that which is perceived or the cause of sensations. Then it gradually claims to show that it produces that which feels the sensations, and this is self-contradictory and absurd. As materialism is one-sided and imperfect, so is the spiritualistic or idealistic theory of the world, which denies the existence of matter or object and says that everything is mind.
This reminds me of drama. We have a drama expert here. Have you ever done a one-person show where you had to play a bunch of parts? Of course, you do readings. You do dramatic readings sometimes, right? So you're one person, but you've created an atmosphere where there are multiple people in your play. When you're a person that's doing a one-person show is on the stage and they're over here and they're reading lines and they might make a couple steps across here to make the illusion that there's somebody else. And so this reminds me of the nature of the world. It's there's really only one of us here, but somehow we're perceiving ourselves as many, all interacting. So he goes on to say that the theory of modern Christian science, that all is mind. Christian Science was huge back in his day. Back in the 1920s, it was a extremely popular new church, you could say. I mean, not as big as the mainstream denominations, but it still was having a huge impact. The theory of modern Christian science, that all is mind and that there is no matter, is as erroneous as the materialistic theory. Spirit or mind or ego, which is always the subject, can exist as perceiver or knower so long as there is an object of perception and knowledge. If we admit the existence of one, that of the other is implied. Therefore, Goethe was correct in saying, matter cannot exist and be operative without spirit, or spirit without matter. The universal substance appears as possessing these two attributes of subject and object, of spirit, mind, or ego, and matter, or non-ego. They are like two modes of one eternal substance, which is unknown and unknowable existence. Sounds like Brahman, doesn't it? It is the same as, now I don't know German, do you? Ding all sick. Anyway, or the transcendental thing in itself. Kind of sounds like thing in itself, doesn't it? Plato named it the good. It is the oversoul of Emerson, while in Vedanta it is called Brahman, the absolute substance of the universe, the infinite and eternal source of matter and mind, of object and subject. This substance is not many, but one. All varieties of phenomena have come out of this one source, Brahman, and it is into it that they will be reduced at the time of dissolution. It is the universal energy, the mother or producer of all forces. We know that all the manifestations of the same eternal energy, or the infinite substance, from this one source, all mental and physical phenomena are material forces, and material forces have come into existence and have evolved into various forms and shapes through the magic of Maya. It's like a magic show. All right, you want to read a paragraph?
This is monism. The monistic thinkers of the present age, like Ernest Haeckel and others, admit this one eternal substance as the source of mind, matter, and all forces. They also accept the great truth, which has always been taught by Vedanta. From that infinite substance, or Brahman, the absolute being, have evolved life force, or prana, mind, all the mental activities, and the sense powers which are included in the meaning of the term spirit, or subject on the one hand, and on the other, space or ether, and all gaseous, liquid, and solid objects which are understood by matter. Matter in its simplest state can be reduced to the same infinite substance, Brahman, which forms the background of mind or spirit. Therefore, Vedanta teaches that the eternal substance is both the material and the efficient cause of the universe. Although it is one, still it appears as many by its inscrutable power, known in Vedanta as Maya.
Okay, I'll take a turn here. This world is not made up of dead matter alone. It is not the product of the combination of those minute particles called atoms. Until lately, the Western physicists, chemists, and other materialists believed that these atoms were individual units, floating in an infinite space, attracting and repelling one another, mechanically producing the elements of nature and creating the phenomenal world. But now, through the application of electricity, J.J. Thomson, the great English scientist, has proved that the so-called individual atoms can be subdivided into finer electrons, which are nothing but the force centers of the ancient Hindu scientists. If atoms are made up of electrons and electrons are but force centers, where do they exist? They exist in that primordial ocean of infinite substance, or Brahman, the receptacle of the eternal energy, which is in turn the mother of all forces. Thus, we can understand how matter and force are related to the one substance, or Brahman. The objective side of that substance appears as matter, and the subjective side as spirit. Okay, take a turn.
It's about time.
Almost time, yeah. Let's see if we can get a couple more paragraphs in.
I have already said that it is a scientific truth that matter is indestructible and uncreatable. So is force. Matter and force can be transformed into various manifestations, but can never be destroyed. Now the question arises, if the one half of the word, or objective matter and force, be uncreatable and indestructible, then what is the nature of spirit? Is it creatable and destructible? If the objective half of the universe be uncreatable and indestructible, how can the other half, the subjective mind or spirit, be creatable and destructible? That is impossible. Spirit or mind in its simplest form is equally uncreatable and indestructible. If matter or object be eternal, then the spirit or subject must also be eternal to make it possible for the object to be eternal. We will know that matter and force are eternal if the spirit or subject be not equally eternal. This point has been overlooked by most of the eminent thinkers and scientists of different countries. The eternality of matter and force or energy presupposes the eternality of spirit or mind. If the one falls, both will disappear. Therefore, the ultimate analysis of spirit and matter shows that both are uncreatable, indestructible, and eternal. If the one pole of a magnet be eternal, the other pole must necessarily be eternal. Furthermore, the neutral point where both meet must also be eternal. This universe is like a gigantic magnet, one pole of which is matter, and the other is spirit, while the neutral point is absolute substance. For this reason, these three, matter, spirit, and Brahman, are eternal.
Yeah, magnet's a good illustration because you can't divide the North Pole from the South Pole. You can't cut the bar magnet in half and have just a North Pole sitting over here and a South Pole sitting over here with unconnected. You end up with two. You end up with two bar magnets, each one with a North Pole and a South Pole. It's like that. They seem to be two different things, and yet they have to be connected into one. They've arisen from one phenomenon. All right, well, we are kind of out of time, so we didn't quite finish this lecture, but we almost did. So we will conclude here with the chant, which really sums it all up. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is it still the same. Peace, peace, peace.